Have you ever noticed a constant voice in your head, or an incessant stream of thoughts that never seems to stop? Perhaps you believe that this voice is who you really are, but what if, behind every thought, there was something much greater, something that is always present but rarely noticed? Most of us live immersed in this mental whirlwind, so used to its sound that we barely notice its presence. But what happens when, for a brief moment, that noise dissolves? What do you find in the silence that arises? The awakening of consciousness begins precisely in that moment of pause. It's as if, for a brief second, you see reality through a window that was once covered. A glimpse of something greater, a connection that has always been there but that you may never have noticed. This is the invitation that higher consciousness offers us, not to get lost in the labyrinth of thoughts, but to find our way back to the now. It is in the present that true consciousness reveals itself. This awakening is like rediscovering what has always been here. If you take a moment to observe, you may realize that beyond the thoughts, there is a stillness, a presence that is already within you, just waiting to be noticed. Perhaps you have already experienced this without even realizing it. A moment when time seemed to stop, when everything around you faded into the background, and you simply were. These moments are not rare, but they often go unnoticed. So today, you'll discover what spiritual awakening feels like, and more importantly, you will understand why the true key to spiritual awakening lies in the state of pure presence, where you awaken your consciousness and recognize that you can live beyond the constant stream of thoughts. As you begin to observe your own mind, something subtly disconcerting can emerge. The realization that thoughts seem to arise on their own, like a voice that never shuts up. This voice, tireless and incessant, often takes control of our perception of reality, creating a continuous narrative about who we are, what we do, and how we see the world. The main problem with this voice is not the fact that we think it, but the way we deeply identify with these thoughts. Every time a thought arises, it carries with it an identification, a sense of self that surrounds us and makes us believe that we are what we are thinking. As a result, without realizing it, we start creating a false identity based on judgments, memories, and future projections. This identity, which we believe to be so real, is actually constructed from the automatic flow of thoughts. But do you really think? Or are you being thought by your own thoughts? This is the central question that leads us to an important point of reflection. Many times we believe we have control over what goes through our minds when, in reality, our thoughts arise almost automatically, without any conscious involvement. The mind creates stories, judges, compares, predicts, and remembers, and we simply follow that flow without questioning its origin or validity. This state of being thought by your thoughts is an illusion that keeps us trapped in a fabricated reality. It's like living in a dream, where each thought shapes our perception and consequently, our actions. When we are in this state, we lose connection with the now, with the present moment. We are swept away by a current of ideas that transports us to the past, with its memories and regrets, or to the future, with its anxieties and uncertainties. This continuous cycle disconnects us from the true essence of what it means to be alive, conscious, and present. However, recognizing this constant flow of thoughts is the first step towards awakening consciousness. When you realize there is a voice in your head, something magical begins to happen. This simple act of observation creates a small distance between you and your thoughts. Suddenly, you are no longer completely absorbed by the mental content, and this opens up space for something new, presence. This active observation is the beginning of a transformative journey, because when you recognize that your thoughts are not you, but rather a manifestation of the mind, you start to weaken the false identity those thoughts construct. And over time, This practice of conscious observation allows you to access a deeper level of perception, where thought no longer dominates your experience but becomes just a component of it. The voice in your head will still be there, of course, because thinking is a natural function of the human mind. But now, what changes is your relationship with that voice. Instead of being controlled by it, you begin to notice that there is something beyond thoughts, a consciousness that observes, that is present. And it is at this point that true awakening begins to blossom, leading you to a deeper understanding of who you really are. But after we start observing our thoughts, a fundamental question arises. What is the difference between thinking and being truly conscious? We often confuse the mere act of being with the endless stream of thoughts that flows through our minds. However, these two states are radically different, and understanding this difference is essential for the awakening of consciousness. Thought, by its very nature, is limited. It is shaped by our past experiences, beliefs, and conditioning. When we are trapped in thought, we become victims of a repetitive cycle, where the same stories replay in our minds over and over. It's like living in a loop, where thought directs our emotions, actions, and even how we perceive the world around us. In this state, we are prisoners of our minds, and the illusion of control over life keeps us trapped in a fabricated reality. Now contrast that with higher consciousness. Higher consciousness is not limited to what has happened or what might happen. It's not about memories or expectations. It simply is. When we are aware, we are present. We feel the moment deeply, without the need to interpret, label, or judge. Thinking ceases, and the space for a broader perception opens up. In this state, time seems to lose its hold on us, and the true essence of life can be experienced directly. Imagine, for example, standing in front of a stunning landscape, a sunset that paints the sky in shades of orange and red. If you're stuck in your thoughts, you may notice the beauty, but your mind will quickly begin to interpret. What a beautiful sunset. I would like to see this more often. Maybe I should come here more often. These thoughts, no matter how simple, take you away from the direct experience. Instead of simply experiencing the sunset, you are mentally processing it, and that layer of thought separates you from the depth of the moment. Now, imagine the same situation, but this time without thoughts. You simply observe the sunset without naming it, without judging it, without wishing it were any different from what it is. There is only presence. In that stillness, the moment expands. The feeling of being alive, aware, and in harmony with what's in front of you becomes much more vivid. This is the state of full awareness, a direct connection with reality without the interference of thought. And awareness or presence is the higher consciousness, the arising new consciousness. This difference can also be perceived in human interactions. Think about what it's like to look into the eyes of a small child before they develop the ability to speak or understand complex concepts. When you look at them, there is a clarity, a purity in their gaze, because there are no thoughts behind those eyes. This is the transformative power of higher consciousness. It frees us from the endless cycle of thoughts and reconnects us with what is most true and essential in life. Consciousness, unlike thought, is not limited by time or the ego. When we are trapped in thought, we are constantly worried about who we are, what we have done, and what we will do. The ego feeds on these stories, creating a sense of separation between us and the world around us. However, in presence, the ego dissolves. There is no longer a need to control, to be, or to prove anything. There is only the moment, and it is in the moment that we find true freedom. This freedom comes from the ability to observe thoughts without identifying with them. Instead of being carried away by the flow of thoughts, you become the observer. And it is this shift in perspective, from being thought by thoughts to becoming the conscious observer, that radically transforms the way we live. The mind continues to function, but it no longer dominates our experience. We are able to appreciate the present moment, to feel life in its fullness, without the limitations imposed by constant mental activity. This transition from a life dominated by thought to a life anchored in presence is the heart of spiritual awakening. It is what allows us to experience life in a richer, deeper, and more meaningful way. And by living this way, we not only free ourselves from the suffering caused by constant thoughts, but we also become more open to what life really has to offer. Even as we become more aware of the constant flow of thoughts and how they shape our perception of the world, an essential question arises. How can we find a break from this incessant cycle? Well, the answer lies in something that many people overlook, but which is fundamental to the awakening of consciousness: inner space. Inner space can be understood as a kind of internal spaciousness, a state in which thoughts still exist but no longer dominate. It's the silent gap between one thought and another, where we find a deeper dimension of consciousness. This space is not an absence, but a silent presence, a vast and peaceful field that has always been within us, waiting to be accessed. One way to understand this concept is through the metaphor of the empty cup used in Zen teachings. In traditional teachings, the Zen master suggests that for someone to be taught, they must first empty their cup, as a full cup cannot receive anything else. This metaphor, as powerful as it is often misunderstood as the need to completely empty the mind. But what's really being suggested here is the creation of space, enough space for something new to arise. Imagine your mind as a cup overflowing with thoughts, worries, and judgments. When your mind is full in this way, there is no room for new perceptions, for clarity, or for full awareness. Creating inner space means allowing this cup to empty a little so that something else can emerge. And that something else is presence, the silent awareness that is beyond thought. But how do we create this space? How do we cultivate the ability to let go of thought's dominance and make room for something deeper? The key lies in the practice of stillness and silence. In the fast pace of everyday life, we rarely allow ourselves moments of true stillness. Even when we are physically alone, our minds continue to produce thoughts constantly. That's why moments of silence, whether through meditation, contemplation, or even a simple pause during the day, are so important. When we give ourselves these moments of silence, something remarkable begins to happen. The thoughts start to slow down and the sensation of thinking dissolves. It's not that thoughts disappear completely, but they lose their power. Instead of being carried away by them, we observe them passing by. And in this process, an inner space opens up. This space is not empty in the traditional sense, but is full of possibilities, a living presence that permeates everything. Cultivating inner space does not require complicated practices or complex spiritual philosophies. In fact, it's quite the opposite. The simpler, the better. One of the most direct ways to begin creating this space is simply by paying attention to your breath. The breath is always with you, always available as an anchor point in the present. When you focus your attention on it, even for just a few seconds, you begin to slow the rhythm of thoughts and open up that space. Another effective way to create inner space is through the conscious observation of your senses. For example, while walking, instead of letting your mind wander between worries and future thoughts, direct your attention to what you're perceiving at that exact moment, like the sound of your steps, the wind against your skin, or the colors around you. These simple acts of conscious perception help shift your focus from thought to the present, creating a quiet interval in which full awareness can emerge. These moments of silence and attention don't need to be long or difficult to achieve. Even a brief pause during the busyness of the day can be enough to open up that space. The true practice of inner space lies in its continuity, in the repetition of these moments over time. Gradually, they begin to expand and integrate into your daily life until the inner space becomes a natural part of your life experience. As this space grows, you begin to notice that it's the place from which true clarity arises. The answers you seek don't come from reasoning or mental analysis, but emerge spontaneously from the stillness. Life suddenly seems less chaotic, less dominated by constant thoughts. Instead, a sense of inner peace starts to prevail, a tranquility that does not depend on external circumstances but is always accessible within you. And this inner space is, in fact, the meeting point between silence and awareness. It's what takes us from a thought-dominated existence to a life of presence and clarity. It's what makes us live in harmony with the present moment, allowing the mind to return to its role as a tool and not as a master. Spiritual awakening, contrary to what many people imagine, is not a grand and definitive event. It rarely occurs as a single moment of revelation, where everything changes instantly. Awakening is more like a series of small flashes, moments of clarity and presence that arise subtly over time. These moments, no matter how small they seem, have the power to profoundly transform the way we perceive the world. These flashes of consciousness do not follow a predictable pattern or sequence. They can arise unexpectedly during the most ordinary, routine activities of the day. Perhaps you are walking down a familiar street and suddenly you find yourself completely immersed in the experience of being present. The sound of your footsteps, the gentle breeze on your face, the sunlight on the leaves of the trees. For an instant, you stop worrying about what happened in the past or what might happen in the future. You simply are. And in that moment, a deep peace emerges, even if only for a few seconds. These moments of presence are often spontaneous and can be so subtle that we barely notice them. A clear example of this is when we are in contact with nature. Imagine standing before a vast landscape, a mountain, the sea, or even a peaceful park. Suddenly, something inside you quiets down. The thoughts momentarily cease, and you find yourself completely connected with what is around you. The sound of the waves, the wind in the trees, or the simple silence of nature creates a sense of peace and belonging. This is a flash of consciousness, a moment when the mind loses its dominance and the present becomes fully alive. But these flashes are not limited to nature. They can occur anywhere, anytime. Maybe you're interacting with a small child, observing their curiosity and innocence. Looking into their eyes, you realize there is no judgment, no past or future in those eyes, just the present moment. And for a few seconds, you connect with that purity. This is another example of a flash of consciousness, a moment when the presence of the child leads you to experience the same simplicity and stillness of the now. The most important thing about these flashes is that they don't need to be labeled as spiritual to have value. One of the most common traps of spiritual awakening is the tendency to label and define every experience. This can be tricky because, in doing so, we run the risk of losing the spontaneity of these moments, trying to fit them into pre-established categories or concepts. A flash of consciousness is, above all, a direct experience, something that transcends thought and the need for explanation. It simply happens effortlessly, and its simplicity is what makes it so powerful. These moments of presence are essential for our inner growth. They may seem brief and insignificant, but each one has the potential to bring us closer to a deeper and more lasting state of consciousness. It is through these small openings that we begin to understand that true peace does not come from solving every problem or controlling all circumstances, but from being fully present with whatever is happening right now. And every time we experience this state, no matter how brief, a seed of consciousness is planted within us. And over time, these flashes of consciousness start to become more frequent. They stop being isolated moments and begin to integrate into our daily lives. What was once a brief instant of peace expands and the feeling of presence becomes more accessible. This is the process of awakening, not a sudden and definitive change, but a series of small steps, small openings that lead us to a new way of being. These moments don't need to be actively sought. In fact, the more we seek them, the more they seem to escape us. The key to cultivating these flashes of consciousness is simply being open, being receptive to the present moment without expectations or judgments. They arise naturally when we stop trying to control them and allow ourselves to just be. And it is in this simplicity that the true essence of awakening lies, a continuous, gradual, and deeply transformative experience. The practice of bringing attention back to the present moment not only transforms the way we perceive the world, but also changes our relationship with it. Being present is more than simply living in the here and now superficially. It's a radical shift in how we interact with our thoughts, emotions, and circumstances. When we are fully present, we begin to realize that most of the problems we face don't come from reality itself, but from our mental interpretation of it. This state of awareness, by taking us away from the continuous flow of thoughts and judgments, allows us to see things as they really are, without the filters that thinking creates. And this brings unexpected clarity, a new way of seeing life that was previously hidden behind mental noise. The practical effect of this presence is immediate. For example, by being present in a stressful situation, instead of reacting automatically to it, we can observe our reaction and choose how to respond. This does not mean that stress disappears completely, but it loses some of its control over us. Awareness gives us space to breathe, to observe without judgment, and in doing so, we free ourselves from the impulsive and automatic reaction that often makes the situation worse. When we are trapped in constant thought, our emotions are often amplified by the mental narrative we build around them. The mind can turn a small worry into a major source of anxiety, simply by projecting future scenarios or reliving past events. But by bringing awareness to the present moment, we interrupt this cycle. The mind no longer has fuel to feed these worries, and as a result, we feel a peace that is not tied to anything in particular, a peace that comes from the simple experience of being here, now. This inner peace is transformative not only personally, but also in our relationships with others. When we are present, we become more attentive, more open, and less reactive. Our interactions are no longer governed by the ego or automatic thought patterns. Instead, we respond to each moment genuinely, without bringing the weight of the past or the expectations of the future into the conversation. This creates a new quality in relationships, where communication becomes clearer, more authentic, and more empathetic. The people around us notice this change, even unconsciously, and this alone can transform the dynamic of our connections. In addition, this state of openness is incredibly transformative because it takes us out of a fixed mindset and places us in a flow of adaptation, acceptance, and continuous evolution. As a result, problems that once seemed insurmountable begin to lose their power, and we start to see solutions that we could not see before. Another practical benefit of living in a state of presence is the improvement of mental and physical health. Science has already shown that the regular practice of mindfulness can reduce levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, and promote a greater sense of well-being. By reducing the impact of worries and excessive thinking, the body responds in a more balanced way. Also, sleep quality, digestion, and even the immune system can benefit when our minds are less overwhelmed and more aligned with the present moment. The transformative power of awareness also extends to the way we relate to ourselves, because when we live in the present, we begin to let go of the fixed idea of a rigid identity. What once seemed like me a construction of thoughts, experiences, and judgments, begins to dissolve as we realize that we are much more than that. Awareness shows us that we are not our thoughts or our emotions. We are the presence that observes all of this. And this realization is freeing. Living this way brings a lightness to life. It does not mean that challenges will no longer exist, but our relationship with them will change completely. This change in perspective is what makes awareness so powerful and transformative. It gives us the tools to live with more intention, more clarity, and above all, more peace. So, as we reach the end of this video, I'd like to leave you with a message. The power of awareness lies in the simplicity of its practice. It's available at any time, anywhere. Every time we bring our attention back to the now, even for just a few seconds, we are activating this power. And it is through this continuous practice that our relationship with the world, with others, and with ourselves begins to transform deeply. Thank you for embarking on this journey with me. If this video resonated with you, I invite you to like and subscribe to our channel. Share this video with others so they can benefit from this message. And don't forget to leave a comment below sharing your thoughts, reflections, and experiences. Thanks again for watching and for joining me. Take care and see you soon.